gentlemen.
Uh-oh.
It's time for the Early Bird Special. Bringing you the best stories from the world of sports and sports entertainment. Now, here are your hosts, Sparky and Burdick.
Welcome back to the Early Bird Special. I'm Chris Burdick. That's Sparky, and it is time for the free agent frenzy of the NFL. As the first couple days are upon us, there's been plenty of signings, or at least verbal agreements. I'm not sure if written agreements have actually gone through yet. Tomorrow, technically, we are recording this on a Wednesday. Tomorrow is the first day of the new season of the 2025 NFL season. Sparky, how are you feeling right now? I know both of our teams are in free agency limbo right now. We're not expecting a lot of big signings this year because of the cap space issues. But how are you feeling? How are your Dolphins looking?
Oh, this is the perfect time of the year when your mediocre team is in the news. So I'm excited. This is the fun time of the season before you actually have to watch your team lose on national TV. But I mean,
everybody has faith around this time, around the draft time. I mean, this is when everybody's spirits are at its highest because everyone's 0-0.
Well,
You never know.
I know we're going to get into part of that because one of the things that are on our list to do today on the show is to talk about teams that, might be, moving upwards, I would say. And, I had to remind my buddy that's a Rams fan we'll talk to later in the season, but it's the off season. And, as a Dolphin fan, there's been several years in the past since my team's been shit for years. True. That we go out and spend $100 million in the first 2 or 3 days of free agency. And it really doesn't change anything if you don't have the right coaching, you don't have the right, game plan. So ideally, before we start jumping into these lists, just from today in the last hour before we got home, I just saw the rumor mill. The Chargers brought back Denzel Perryman. The Steelers are officially signing Darius Slay. It was agreed to term a couple days ago, and then Darius Slay went and tweeted that we haven't signed anything. And so today he officially is a Pittsburgh Steeler. The Seahawks picked up DeMarcus Lawrence over from the Cowboys, which is going to be a missing piece for Dallas. So I'm going to be kind of looking on the signings to see who the hell is going to replace that guy, because he's been their staple for years. And then the last one that I saw was the Jets not only picked up the center Josh Myers from the Packers, but they turned around and released linebacker veteran CJ Mosley, which is a kind of a shock to me. And my team needs a linebacker, so I would be more than happy to get somebody like that. And just to say, Mosley was a Raven for years, and the Dolphins defensive coordinator just happened to be with the Ravens for the last 7 or 8 years. So, and then the last one was running back A.J. Dillon, that's been with the Packers, signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. Going through the first couple days, which is I think the word is legally tampering, that you can talk to the teams. I know they rarely ever do anything about teams that illegally tamper, but I did send you a story last night that the Chiefs and somebody else,
the Washington Commanders,
the Commanders and the Chiefs are going to get penalized.
Yes,
for illegally tampering.
Well, we saw this last year as well with Atlanta got busted for tampering with the Kirk Cousins deal, I believe. And it was the Eagles. The Eagles got busted for the Saquon Barkley deal as well. So this does happen every year. I think you're going to see a little more of a clamp down on it, because I guess the entire idea is that they were trying to get Ronnie Staley away from Baltimore. Didn't work out. Staley decided to re-sign with the Baltimore Ravens and told the media that apparently the Commanders and the Chiefs had sent him formal offers, which you're not allowed to do yet, because you can entice people to pull away from teams based on money offers and stuff like that. There's always a grace period just to make it fair for everybody. So I do see the point that they're trying to make, that you can't allow this. You have to allow these teams to have their period of time where they can re-sign their guys. So it only makes sense that these guys get penalized. just because, like I said, if you're setting the precedent last year with Atlanta and Philadelphia, you have to do the same with Washington and the Kansas City Chiefs.
And usually they'll strip you of a seventh
Draft pick.
rounder or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think Atlanta lost a 4th rounder, if I'm not mistaken. Shit. I can't remember exactly how high it was. I might be mistaken on that, but I'm pretty sure it was as high as a 4th round.
Well, before we jump into that, since you brought up the big Kirk, you think Atlanta, I believe, has a couple of days before big $10 million bonus.
From what I understand, is their plan is to keep Kirk Cousins and on the roster after, because I believe Sunday is the cutoff day. If you don't trade him by Sunday, then we have to pay him at least $10 million, I believe, of the contract, which is a big chunk. But it doesn't make sense to me, because all the things I keep reading are that the team is comfortable with keeping Kirk Cousins as a backup this year. I don't see that being the case. Not at the money you're paying him. Nobody in the league wants to pay a backup the amount of money that Atlanta is paying Kirk Cousins. So I can only imagine that they are working out a plan to get something for Kirk Cousins.
Yes.
And I think that they're saying that we are willing to play the long game here and take away that piece, because as we just saw with the LA Rams, since we'll talk about that, because that officially happened today, had to release Cooper Kupp because they knew they weren't going to get anything of value, or I shouldn't say that because it makes Cooper sound bad, but they weren't going to get what they wanted out of a trade for Cooper Kupp. No, because every other team knew that they could just drop him instead and they'll just pick him up for free or whatever amount of dollar that you have to pay Cooper to come play. So it's kind of the same thing with Kirk Cousins. Atlanta's just trying to take that piece away from other teams and potentially get something for this trade, which again, still sit here hoping and praying that Cleveland decides to say, "Hey, Miles, you're shipping up and going to Atlanta." Thank you.
Man, I hope, man, because that would be a great pickup for you guys. I don't see. I mean, the Browns rarely do anything smart.
I know he just signed a $40 million deal, and I realize that nobody walks away from that kind of money, and it's fine, but I'm just saying he seemed pretty convinced he wanted out of Cleveland a couple weeks ago, and it's really hard to change that, even with a certain amount of dollar signs being thrown at your face.
So as soon as you said that, it is official. The Cooper Kupp is officially released. And one of the guys on my, we'll get to it at the end of the show, is I've got the top available players, and one of them is just signed with the Carolina Panthers. Cowboys running back Rico Dowdy just signed with the Carolina Panthers after they released Miles Sanders the other day. So it looks like they're replacing Miles with Rico Dowdle as the running back for Carolina. So
that makes sense. But I mean, Chuba Hubbard's still going to be the number one guy going forward, I would assume.
Probably within the the first 72 hours of all these news breaking. Let's run down some of these. I wouldn't say the top 5 or top 6, but just something you think is a good move.
The most impactful, we would say. Well, you know what? I know we talked about ours off the screen here, but obviously we're going to get into them right now. My first big one. And I really love to see it because I've been harping at this for the last couple of years, and I love to see that Chicago is finally learning something. But Chicago has finally addressed their biggest issue on offense, in my opinion, which is that offensive line, by signing Drew Dahlman and trading for Thuney. And oh Lord,
that Thuney one was crazy.
And I cannot remember the other guy they got from who used to play with Johnson at in Detroit. I'm blanking on his name, but essentially Chicago has done the correct moves to absolutely restructure the interior, not only their offensive line, but their defensive line. Because not only did they steal Atlanta's kidney with that Drew Dahlman steal, but they stole the heart because of absolutely stealing away Grady Jarrett for a 3-year deal.
Oh my God. That was a good one.
That was a steal, in my personal opinion. We're talking about a defensive tackle that's been an absolute monster and a game wrecker for Atlanta for years. I know they've been at the bottom in terms of QB sacks, but pressures have all been about Grady Jarrett's game. And honestly, Grady Jarrett, if you remember correctly, I know I love that the Pat McAfee show brought this up the other day because they're completely right about this. Grady Jarrett has had an incredible impact on the game of football because of the rule changes that have happened since the Atlanta and New England game, including the changes to the offensive line game and how they can actually block these guys, and the defensive line game and how they can get around these guys. Because Grady Jarrett made a lot of things look stupid in that Super Bowl game. But in my personal opinion, that is one of the biggest impactful moves thus far in the offseason is what Chicago's been able to do.
Yeah, that other offensive lineman was Jonah Jackson.
Thank you.
They took from the Rams.
Yeah, more than likely Jonah and Thuney will be the guards and Dahlman will be the center. Dude. And that's going to absolutely give Caleb Williams the time to get the shit done that he needs to. And now we will see finally if Caleb Williams, after this season, there is no, like, I know sophomore slump's a thing, so they'll probably bring that up as well. But Caleb Williams officially has no excuse that he can't get the job done.
Well, the other one I'm going to bring up that I'll start with is the DK Metcalf. I know it's been a big talk. You know, seeing Pittsburgh be aggressive is something new over the years I've watched. But, you know, a lot of teams were, DK might be a great pickup for this team and that team. But to go back to the perfect fit for a player with a lot of attitude, a lot of drama, with Pete Carroll out of Seattle, he was kind of twirling downhill the last year or so. I think if anybody's going to be able to fix that guy or keep him, tamed, is going to be Tomlin. Ideally, I can't list, what I expect out of DK because, one, they don't have a quarterback yet. And two, Pittsburgh has always been a rushing first type of team. And once again, I was a little shocked to see them, drop Najee Harris like nothing. But they did pick up Kenneth Gainwell from Philly. They still had the other running back that split carries with Najee last year. So one question is, one, because they don't have a lot of salary cap left, but two, are they planning on keeping George Pickens? Because I know Pickens and them were bumping heads at the end of the last season.
I think that this move would most likely be one of those, like, well, take the Colts situation, for example, with bringing in Daniel Jones and having to challenge Anthony Richardson for the chance to be the first overall quarterback on that team. And now, from what I understand, is Richardson might even be threatening to want a trade out of the Colts because of this move. But I think this is kind of a similar move for the Pittsburgh Steelers, is you bring in a guy like DK Metcalf, who has a history of being a hothead himself, is still a little more of a, I'd say, physical specimen than George Pickens, and kind of plays the same kind of game. So I think they're bringing him in to say, hey, we can get somebody else to play just like you. So now you have to compete with this guy for your spot. Because if there's one thing that Tomlin knows how to do, is gets his guys to compete for their spot. So I think at this point, now I love the pick, and I love that is on your list, Sparky. But my personal opinion, I think Pittsburgh would have benefited more from a guy like Devontae Adams than DK Metcalf. And I'm going to use that to go into my pick, because that is my second biggest pick of the week, is the fact that the Rams were able to sign Devontae Adams to a 2-year deal, $46 million, to replace Cooper Kupp, as we mentioned earlier in the video, is gone for the rest of, or for however you want to look at the future, because he could, I guess, come back for one season at the end of his career if it ends up that way, but we don't know what the future holds for Cooper. But at this point right now, I think this really benefits the Rams, as they brought back both of their quarterbacks, in Jimmy Garoppolo and Matthew Stafford, and now essentially don't skip a beat when it comes to the wide receiver production. Puka Nacua no longer has to worry about having multiple double teams focused on him throughout these games, and it's going to be a lot of attention on Devontae throughout the season too. And I do believe if there is any other quarterback besides Aaron Rodgers to make Devontae Adams look good, it is Matthew Stafford, who has made a career of making wide receivers look good.
Yeah. And he's, what the thing was with Puka and Kupp, they're kind of the same type of receiver. They get a lot of receptions, and,
I would argue Puka's a little tougher.
Oh
I
yeah.
think
Oh
he could
yeah.
take a harder hit. Cooper always looked like he was when he was younger, but I think the older, obviously, time catches up with us all.
Yeah,
So
I mean, before Puka, Cooper Cup was a Super Bowl MVP. So I mean, he's got some years on him. But I think if you're gonna get anybody, I'll go back to my buddy Latroy. He's a big Rams fan, so I always bounce stuff off him. He was a little upset that they let the what was it, DeMarcus go. But
really,
yeah,
Demarcus Robinson?
now
Okay.
he's with the 49ers. But if you get somebody personally as a football fan, I'm not a Devonte Adams fan just because he's always been that kind of drama social media type guy. But on the field, he's only going to make Puka better, if anything. And Stafford's got to be happy. He's got two awesome receivers.
Again, you don't miss a beat on offense. Not to mention Kyron Williams and Tyler Higbee. So
And just talking or listening to other sports shows just since the signing, it was that signing that kept the Rams relevant. They were a top 2, top 3 team last year, and if they were just going to lose Cup and have to, band-aid that position, they were probably going to drop below Detroit and a couple other NFC teams. And I think that is what you were just saying. I think the Rams, it just keeps them relevant for another year.
and I'll get more into the Rams later on, but at this point right now, it was a necessary move. And unfortunately, I know Rams fans, their hearts are breaking right now when you lose Cooper Cup. And as an Atlanta Falcons fan, I feel your pain. Trust me, when we lost Julio, it was a bad day for me. It really, really was. So.
I'll keep it at receivers. DeAndre Hopkins, his stats have gone down, and after a small stint with the Chiefs, he jumps over to Baltimore, which
Finally!
If there is anybody that you would want to leave the Chiefs to, I think is Baltimore. Not only
Absolutely
is he going to fit perfectly with Bateman and Zay Flowers and Derrick Henry and everybody else, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, that's a hell of a pickup. I would say that he is not the DeAndre Hopkins of past, but if anybody's going to make their players or team better, I think it's a perfect fit. I'm not a Ravens fan, but it's kind of hard not to look at that offense and be like, damn, they're ready to either be in that AFC championship again or get into that Super Bowl, which I thought they were going to do last year. But that was a good pickup. One thing I will say before we move up to your other pick, the Chiefs, after losing DeAndre Hopkins and Juju and a couple other guys, trading off.
Show me Stephon Diggs. Show me Stephon Diggs.
I don't want to see that, but he is there. But the other thing is they just cleaned up salary cap, cleaning up Mahomes and cleaning up
Chris Jones's contracts.
I did see not only did that, but they've got now $35 to $40 million in under salary cap. Ooh. So don't think the Chiefs are just going to bend over and take it, because they've got plenty of money to spend now. And I'm hoping that the Dolphins turn around, because Tua, Tyreek, Waddle, all these guys need to take a little pay cut or move it to bonuses so they can get some more talent to stay into this AFC East chase.
Well, I've said a lot off air that Stephon Diggs would be a perfect candidate to go to the Kansas City Chiefs, because he plays that position of wide receiver exactly like Tyreek Hill. He's a very speedy receiver and loves to get free. And I think him and Patrick Mahomes would mesh very, very well. But I think that the Kansas City Chiefs need more help than just wide receiver to come back to the fold of which they used to be. Obviously, trading away Thuney was a big loss to the offensive line. You have to address that. Yes. And unless you see somebody in the draft that could potentially be as equally as an impactful offensive lineman, I can't see that being the case at this point. Mm-hmm. So it really I would expect them to really spread that money around at more of what else is out there, not just the offensive skill players. However, sticking with my next pick, I mean, we're already talking about the wide receiver frenzy, so let's just keep it going. Deebo Samuel headed to the Washington Commanders. As I stumble over myself again, I apologize. I know this happened. I knew this happened early. I know it's probably cheating to say this is an impactful free agency move, because obviously it happened well before everything started moving around. But I don't think people really realize what this means for not only the Washington Commanders, who have made some pivotal moves, and I'll get to that later as well, but to the San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers are having to deal with the fact that now they can no longer have a quarterback on a rookie deal, which means they can't afford everybody else. And as I think it was Micah Parsons said, and I loved seeing it, but they're coming back to reality, and welcome to it. I'm sorry. But Deebo Samuel was a huge, huge impactful player for the San Francisco 49ers going forward last year. We assumed that he was going to be the wide receiver one, and they were going to move away from Brandon Ayuk. And apparently they have full pivot from that, even though Brandon Ayuk suffered a season-ending injury last season. I'm not sure exactly if San Francisco is going to feel this harshly, because I know they have a lot of really talented receivers underneath. I know Pearsall is a pretty good receiver, but I just don't see anybody filling that hole that Deebo Samuel filled for this team. And with Purdy losing so many targets, it's going to impact his game, and vice versa for the Commanders, because let's not forget the Commanders traded for Laramie Tunsil. They addressed a big need at tackle. They absolutely now have the weapons with Deebo Samuel out there. Scary Terry finally gets to play a little bit of the slot like he usually does and absolutely excels at. I don't think we're ready. I think that everybody thought we saw the best of the Washington Commanders last year, and I don't think we've even scratched the surface yet.
No, I love the signing. I love the trade. Deebo is one of those guys I've always enjoyed watching. I grew up, my dad's best friend was a Redskin fan, so I've always had a little bit of love for the Redskins. So when they were winning games last season, I was like, that's cool to see, because it's been 20, 30 years.
You love to see franchises like this, especially after the turmoil that the franchise went down after the whole Snyder situation. They needed a win, and honestly, they won in the draft last year by taking the right quarterback. And I still think Carolina took the right quarterback too, though. I don't think Bryce Young's a bad quarterback at all. I don't think Caleb's a bad quarterback at all either for Chicago. I think you chose the right choice. I just think everybody landed at the right spot. And like we were talking about before the show, Sparky, it really does matter where you get drafted now. And I think they just have made all the right moves to finally make themselves a contender again, which is bad news if you are a Dallas Cowboys fan and terrible news if you are a Giants fan.
Yes. Well, I'm going to go... I'll bounce off the Giants. So Daniel Jones. So he's not super talented, but he could be a perfect fit for a certain amount of teams. You know, I was happy when he finally got out of New York, because they fumbled the hell out of that whole thing. They should have paid Saquon. They decided, we're going to pay Daniel Jones. Lost Barkley. Barkley got his Super Bowl, and we saw what Barkley looked like without the Giants uniform on. Then Daniel Jones, got shipped to where was he? He was in Minnesota, and we knew they weren't going to keep him. They have got way too many quarterbacks, but at this point, I was like, where do you think Daniel Jones could succeed? And he lands in Indianapolis, not only as a backup, but he's getting starting quarterback type money, $14 million for a 1-year deal, where this team supposedly has a starting quarterback, but out of these quarterbacks that we were talking about that have gotten drafted and landed in good spots, Anthony Richardson hasn't shown me one thing that shows me that he's a quarterback one. And I think if anything you're going to get out of the Daniel Jones signing with the Colts is a quarterback where you're going to have to get the best out of Anthony Richardson, or you're going to find out that was a bad pick and move on. But I think if anything, Daniel Jones, they've got a great running back. They've got a good offensive line. I don't see the best or anything positive where they're going to win a Super Bowl, but I think it was a great pickup when these are one of those teams that aren't sold on a quarterback one. There is a handful of teams right now that are fighting over, who's going to sign Aaron Rodgers, who's going to sign Russell Wilson. And that's pretty much it. There's a couple backup quarterbacks still available in free agency. But after the big trade with Geno, a lot of these teams have had quarterback issues since their franchise quarterback were for say the Colts. They got lucky with Flacco for a year, but ever since Andrew Luck's retirement, they've kind of been the Dolphins fighting and try to find a quarterback, a franchise quarterback. And I don't want to talk about Archie Manning because we haven't got it to this season yet, but a lot of teams we're going to know about week 8 next season which team is going to start tanking for Archie. And ideally, I think Daniel Jones gives them a chance to find out what they got out of Anthony Richardson, if that was the flop or do they need to move on. And I think it gives a player like Daniel Jones a clean reset. And if you're going to be an NFL quarterback, this is your chance.
You're absolutely right. Honestly, I think this quarterback controversy or competition rather is going to show what you get out of AR. And AR we obviously see his mentals are questionable when it comes to leadership and maturity, and that might just be the problem. But at this point, as from what I understand, from what I've listened to the Pat McAfee show, who is pretty in tune with the Colts right now and in their front office, from what I understand, that he might want out now that they moved with Daniel Jones. And if that is the case, that shows that he can't handle the pressure of being a starting quarterback anyway, because he wants it handed to him. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I have no faith in Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has showed me no reason to believe that he could be a starting quarterback in the NFL. Now, you obviously aren't asking me if you could be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I'm not saying that my opinion should mean that much, but I am saying that I've watched football my entire damn life, and I can tell you right now, I've seen what a starting quarterback looks like. And if Daniel Jones is beating you out for your spot, you are not a starting quarterback in the NFL, because Daniel Jones is not a starting quarterback in the NFL. But realistically speaking, I agree with you that it is still a big pickup for the Colts, because I mean, you said it yourself. Ever since the Andrew Luck move, they haven't been able to figure it out. They haven't been able to find anything. I'm not going to sit here and say tank for Archie, because you're going to have to wait 2 years for Archie. We have to remember Archie's going into his sophomore season. He still has one more year at Texas at the very least, unless I'm mistaken and you can come out as a sophomore now, but I doubt that to be the case. And let's be honest, Archie's going to have one season as a starter under his belt at Texas. So we don't know what we're going to see just yet. I think Archie's going to be great, but I can't tell you right now as a sophomore that he can come in next year and be the starter for the Indianapolis Colts and handle the pressure of not only being the heir to the Colts, but the heir to your uncle, who is arguably the biggest quarterback they've ever owned. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't say owned, ever had, next to many, many others. Obviously, I'm not going to take anybody else's credit out of there, but Peyton Manning is Peyton Manning. When you talk about the best quarterbacks in the world ever, Peyton's name comes up more often than not. And to live up to that hype would be very, very difficult. Keeping it with the quarterbacks, though, before I get to my fifth pick, my fourth biggest move here is actually a drop, not a signing, and that is the move on from Aaron Rodgers and the fact that potentially he could continue his career, but his career does hang in the balance in this offseason, because if he doesn't get picked up, does he continue playing football or does he retire? Personally, I think he may retire if he doesn't get picked up, but there's not a lot of teams out there that are looking for a quarterback outside of maybe Pittsburgh. I've heard a lot of tales that a lot of people in Pittsburgh are hoping that he ends up there. I think that Minnesota could also be a spot, which would be hilarious if you're a football fan, because he would obviously be completing the Brett Favre cycle.
I did hear Brett Favre on ESPN this morning. He was saying, man, I hope he goes to Minnesota.
It would be hilarious, but at this point right now, I think Minnesota is really bought into J.J. McCarthy being the guy, and I don't think I think the move on from Sam Darnold was a showing of that, because if you weren't willing to pay Sam the money, I don't think you're willing to pay Aaron the money. So at this point, I think the best landing spots for Aaron Rodgers would more than likely be the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are right now in quarterback limbo, or the New York Giants, if the Giants do decide to pull him in as well, because I don't believe they even have a quarterback on the roster at the moment. So
they have DeVito right now.
Did they re-sign Tommy DeVito? Okay, so Right now, I mean, Tommy DeVito's obviously won over the fan base on multiple occasions, but he can't win you the entire thing. I think Aaron Rodgers puts you in a much better position to win everything. So at this point right now, I think we're going to be looking for a contract for Aaron, either coming from New York or coming from
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Thank you.
So you look at that, you're Aaron Rodgers, you're sitting in a cave down in the mountains, and you're looking at your options, and you're like, do I go to Pittsburgh where, I'm not going to get as much control as he usually likes? But you walk in and you're playing with DK and,
DK and Pickens, who, again, I question, the only thing I question about that one is the hot-headedness of the receivers. Can you keep them cool? Can you keep them collected and calm?
The hot-headed fans.
That too. But I think the fan bases will rally around you as long as you give them a chance at a championship, because that's all Pittsburgh cares about is the rings.
Or do you turn around and look, because I'm a fan of Malik Neighbors, poor guy. Fucking threw everything out on his rookie season. He was a hell of a player, and nobody's there to throw him the ball right now. So I'm like, why isn't the Giants bending over and just breaking open the checkbook and sign him a quarterback?
I don't know if Aaron Rodgers would want to go to New York, just leaving New Jersey. That's kind of my thing. I think that the media already ate him up enough, and him switching over to the Giants would not exactly make it any different. That's why I personally think Pittsburgh is the place to be for him. I think that just fits, unless you go to Vegas. I can see him in Vegas.
I also think you might have hit it right on the head, because ideally, I think with Devontae Adams signing a deal with the Rams so quick, I think Devontae knows, if anybody, I think Rodgers might be just hanging it up.
He might be, and that's entirely possible, but he may just be, putting his foot back in the water and saying, okay, how much can I get if I do go back to football? You know what I mean? Which is also a fair statement. I think this is going to be a pivotal point in Aaron's career is, does he get picked up here, or does he move on with his career? Because obviously, I know we all love to laugh and joke about the whole Brett Favre situation. Brett's situation was way different. Brett had suitors. Brett had people he wanted, or who wanted him, but he couldn't get out of contracts, so he faked retiring, which is a way worse thing in my personal opinion. But Aaron is being dropped by teams, which means that he is losing the confidence of not only coaching staffs but front offices, and that's going to matter going forward.
Well, after coming back from a torn ACL and then looking like garbage the first 8 weeks of the season last season, I think if it wasn't for those final 5 or 6 games that he actually looked like quarterback one, I think that's the only reason he's probably even in the conversation. But I mean, I think you might be right, because if you look at not only the New York media, but having to go and deal with a franchise that is on the downhill, a coach and a GM that are probably both on their last season with the Giants if they don't turn around something. And the only other option seems to be Pittsburgh. But the part of free agency that I love, there's always that one creep team that'll creep up in and surprise everybody. I know there's several teams that Rodgers could be an upgrade to. But, why isn't anyone talking about, like, Tennessee? I know they've got a top draft pick, but maybe, signing somebody like Rodgers, and trading out of that number 1 pick and getting multiple picks for years if you wanted to, because teams like the Raiders will probably give up anything to get up there and get one of those top 2 quarterbacks in the draft in April. So there's a lot of weird shit that could happen in the next few weeks that this is the best part of the season. I'm going to bounce off and not a release or a pickup. I'm going to go with the trade, and it's on the defensive side. CJ Gardner-Johnson being traded from the Eagles to Houston, and that's a team besides the Tunzel trade, which really shocked me, because I did not think Tunzel would ever play for another team, especially how good he's been in the last few years. And they've got Stroud, and they've got things moving in the right direction. Rich really made me shake my head. I'm like, why would you trade Tunzel? You guys gave up buckets and buckets to Miami to get him. And once you're starting to go in the right direction, you trade him. But CJ Gardner-Johnson is one of those, cornerback safety guys that I've always liked. And, Philly has lost a lot of players just in the last few weeks, whether it was Slay, Gardner Johnson. And I understand they've got to pay some guys. They've got to pay, the Barkley contracts, the AJ Brown contracts, Devontae Smith, not only, Jalen Hurts, but they just lost not only Slay and Gardner Johnson. That's going to change that defense.
Oh, the secondary for sure. I mean, they brought back Zach Bond, who arguably was the defensive player of the year last year. But I have to agree with you. I mean, it's much like the San Francisco 49ers issue is that you just don't have the money to pay everybody. You have to, coordinate the money, and they may fill those spots in the draft. I think that this is going to be a solid secondary draft for people who are looking that route. But I have to agree with you. These teams are losing out on players, but I don't think that it's going to be that much of an issue for if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, because they still have that incredible front seven. And with Zach Bond coming back to lead them, I think that they're not going to necessarily miss a beat, but they'll probably take a little bit of a slide backwards, as most people do after winning a Super Bowl. But I mean, my last pickup here of the week, that is my personal opinion, the biggest one. It's what New England has been able to do with their defensive front seven. They've been able to revamp at least a little bit of it with Milton Williams stealing him away from the Carolina Panthers and adding the former Titan DN Harold Landry as well. Mike Vrabel coming in, defensive-minded coach, and what he loves to do is he has to have a defense that is a stout front seven with safeties that love to swarm a football, one being a bigger hitter than the other, and obviously the other being a ball hawk. And I think this is the beginning of the build of what Vrabel wants in New England. And I think it's a great step forward if you're the Patriots fan, because it has been only a year and what looks like a rebuilding process has already turned around for you. So I'd say you've actually moved in the right direction.
Yeah, I like the Spillane, the linebacker from the Raiders that they picked up. Yep. He was my hidden gem in fantasy football because he always led the team in tackles.
Yep.
I think having Vrabel is also gonna go back to that dirty Patriot defense, and with
rough
those
and tough,
names,
they're gonna beat the shit out of you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think this is the beginning of the build of that again. I think you're gonna see a more formidable Patriots team coming into this next season.
Well, my last one, it was it was kind of a hard one because, I like what Seattle's done with, they've kind of dumped off the older players, the guys that were taking all their money. So I understood the Geno trade. I understood the Sam Darnold pickup, but I also liked the Hassan Reddick. He had a shit year, holding out half the season with the Jets. He wanted out, then he ended up playing and played a couple games. But if you look at his stats, over the years, that was 4 seasons in a row. He had double digits in sacks. He led the team in tackles, but going into a secret type of hidden, he's going to Tampa, man, and Vita Vea, and, lining up next to Levante David. I think the Buccaneers are on the rise. They were able to lock in Godwin. They've got Evans. Baker's been playing lights out. It's still the Buccaneers. They're not the favorites to do a damn thing, but I think that was a hidden nice signing. And one thing that I'll go back to my first pick with DK going to Pittsburgh, I like Najee Harris. He's been 1,000-yard running back every year since his rookie year.
He's played every game too. I think that's a big thing that people don't realize is the Chargers, as we talked with Tyson Hayes yesterday, have had a problem with keeping running backs healthy. And Najee presents a long-term, consistent running back for them that they haven't had since LT.
And I think it's a perfect fit because Harbaugh is a rush first type guy. He wants that dirty, mean running back. And I think you get that out of Najee. There's still a couple missing holes, and I know we talked more of the Chargers yesterday with Tyson's show. So if you didn't check out our show yesterday with Tyson Hayes, he's a Charger fan, local comedian. But with free agency just getting started, I'm sure there's going to be some curveballs and some things that'll mix it up. But ideally, I was looking over before we get into other things. I was looking at, some free agent names that are still out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to bounce off a couple. And, we talked about Aaron Rodgers, but, Dowdle found a home right when we started the show. But there's a couple names like Cooper Kupp.
True.
I thought Dallas was going to be one of the main teams that looking for him. They came out today and said had no interest in him.
They have no money for him. They have to pay their own guys.
When I was looking at the teams with a lot of money, and there is a few that I could see him a perfect fit. There's also a running back named Nick Chubb that is a free agent, which makes me scratch my head that he hasn't been signed yet. I understand he's had a couple rough years with the injuries, but man, I would be so happy if we can get a running back like Nick Chubb, a mean, hungry, that goes, left and right, doesn't dance around. And
runs
I think he'd be
you and over you.
I think he would be a perfect fit in Miami, obviously with losing Raheem Mostert, but there's some other players like Cam Robinson. I know there's plenty of teams that need offensive line help in Miami, and a couple other teams that quarterbacks got beat the hell up. So I wouldn't be surprised if Cam Robinson is the next guy to go. Matt Judon. We just brought up C.J. Mosley. Asante Samuel, we talked a little bit about yesterday. I mean, there's still plenty of talent out there. But is there any Russell Wilson? Do you think the Russell Wilson thing kind of holds off until Aaron Rodgers finds a home?
Yes, I think that. Well, they've already specifically said Pittsburgh being the camp I'm speaking about.
Well, he did meet with Pittsburgh today.
Yes, I think that is their backup plan. I think if Aaron falls through, Russ goes back to Pittsburgh. If Russ does not go back to Pittsburgh, I'm not sure exactly where he finds a home. It's going to be very interesting where a lot of these guys end up. I mean, C.J. Mosley, obviously just hitting the market. I don't think he'll be there very long. Matthew Judon, I'm very surprised hasn't come to a deal with somebody yet. He's an absolute game changer on the defensive side. Asante Samuel Jr. also being one of those guys. I think that guys like Cooper Kupp and Nick Chubb, who obviously are stars at their position, are going to get essentially bargained down because of their injury status and their history with them. I think Nick is obviously one of the best running backs in the league when he actually is healthy, but he has not been healthy any of his career years. So at this point right now, and he didn't look like himself at all last year. So there's really not a whole ton of promise that you are going to get the Nick of old at all. Now, Cooper Kupp is a little bit different. Cooper has been a consistent threat no matter what, even if he's been injured or not. So I think that Cooper comes off the board early to maybe a team like New England who needs a number one receiver, or the LA Chargers who desperately need a number one receiver, and they love little white wide receivers out in LA apparently. So why not pair him with John Harbaugh and Justin Herbert and give him a threat besides Lad McConkey? But I think that it's going to come down to how much money you are willing to pay these guys, knowing that they are on the back end of their careers and are very injury prone, or at least history has shown them to be injury prone. So I think that's going to hold them up at least for the next day or two. But a handful of these guys are going to get picked up very, very quickly as the days progress. Obviously, we said at the beginning of the video, tomorrow is the first day technically of the 2025 season. So I think a lot of these guys are going to fly off the board as well tomorrow.
I think the receivers, we talked a lot about receivers, and there's still plenty of them out there besides Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs, Deontay Johnson, Keenan Allen, Tyler Lockett. I mean, there's plenty of talent out there. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Keenan Allen comes back and plays in Chicago, but he could also go back to the Chargers. He's got a lot of many years with the Chargers, but when you brought up the Stephon Diggs thing, that might just be perfect.
I'm just saying the only team that I could see Stephon playing for is Kansas City at this point right now, unless he goes and plays for Dallas with his brother.
I was just thinking that Dallas would be probably a good pickup too. And there's always that one or two crazy trades that we weren't expecting. I sure the hell wasn't thinking Thuney would be traded. I thought he was going to be the chief guy till he retired. But I overall, looking at what we've seen before the official day of tomorrow, is there any teams that you're thinking are on the rise or on the decline?
I do have a couple teams here that I have down as teams to worry about. Now, whether you want to take that as upper or downer is up to you. But at this point right now, it's broken down into two groups, which is the teams in LA, the Chargers and the Rams. Both are in kind of similar situations where they're in quarterback limbo in a way. This is going to be a huge year for Justin Herbert in his 6th year. We've had comparisons of him and Peyton Manning, obviously last year, breaking Peyton Manning's passing record for the first 5 years of your career. Although his numbers have gone down in the last couple of years as they've more tried to focus on getting a run game going. And with the addition of Najee Harris, I feel like they're going to get that. Hopefully, if the offensive line can stay healthy, because Slater obviously was injured early last year. So we'll see how that goes. But it's going to be a pivotal year for the Chargers and the Rams, as both of them are essentially staring their rivals' window of success closing in the mug, because the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers right now are, I won't say imploding, but are desperately trying to find ways to stay in the race, because we saw last year the Kansas City Chiefs, although making it to the Super Bowl, could barely score over 30 points a game throughout the entire season. Luckily, their defense held up the entire season and really carried them to wins, and the offense struggled throughout the season, even with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. And the San Francisco 49ers right now are losing pieces left and right on the offensive and defensive side. Don't think that pieces like Leonard Floyd leaving aren't going to matter. Leonard played a huge difference on that defensive side for the San Francisco 49ers. And at this point right now, if you are the Rams and you are the Chargers, you want to be on the up right now rather than the way down. Right now, the Chargers seem to be kind of stagnant, I would say. They haven't really made a lot of moves to show me that they are going to go up in the rankings at all this season. And the Rams are making positive moves to keep themselves at least relevant, but you're still staring retirements in the mug. You still have to figure out a replacement for Matthew Stafford at some point in his career. As you saw this year, he wants at least to end his career on a high end with you, and you were one play away realistically from beating the Super Bowl champion and making it to the Super Bowl yourself. So you are not far off at all if you are a Rams fan, and you don't want to lose that momentum. And with the Niners obviously looking the way they do, I think this is the obvious point of view that you need to crash on this division, especially with the Seahawks imploding, and God only knows what we're going to get out of Arizona every year. So at this point right now, if you're a team of either of these LA teams, or I'm sorry, if you're a fan of either of these LA teams right now, you probably should be worried, because this year is going to show how your future is going to go, in my opinion. And then the second group, and these are the good guys in my personal opinion, if you are a team with a second-year quarterback this year, you may be on the uprise, because I'm going to tell you right now, the New England Patriots, the Washington Commanders, the Chicago Bears, and the Minnesota Vikings have all made pivotal changes to their lines, both offensively and defensively, to not only protect these sophomore quarterbacks, but to actually get them going offensively. Because look at it this way. Chicago finally has a lineman that is not only a grizzled vet in Thuney, but somebody that can actually look at Caleb Williams and say, we can do this. You can actually make this play happen. And I'm not, this isn't my own thought. This is something I heard earlier today. I'm just parroting what I heard, but this is absolutely true. Caleb Williams, going through his entire rookie season, must be, for lack of a better word, traumatized by how bad his offensive line played throughout the season, which also played a role in how bad he played throughout the season. And I think with this confidence going forward, he can finally sit back and say, okay, I don't have to worry about my offensive line messing up the protections. I can now worry about what I have to do as a quarterback to make this team successful. And I think other players like Rome Odunze and I think Keenan Allen, if he does decide to come back and play for the Bears, could benefit from this as well, because you could finally get passes off and those big plays that Caleb was known for in college at Oklahoma and USC. And taking it further, Washington has done nothing but just absolutely reload in places that they needed to make Jaden's life absolutely easier. Minnesota, although looking the first year of J.J. McCarthy's actual career in the mug, has made moves after being absolutely embarrassed by the Rams in the playoffs last season. And again, the New England Patriots, as I mentioned, have made pretty solid moves on the defensive line, at least, to make themselves contenders in their division as well. So I think if you have a team with a second-year quarterback, you might be looking at potentially outlasting the sophomore slump. But that's just my opinion.
Well, I think you're probably right on the dot, because there was, there's always years with the, 5 quarterbacks that everyone's talking about. And last year was a home run. All of them looked damn good. And there's quarterbacks that didn't get to hit the field until late in the season.
Right.
One of them, like Joe Milton, that I expect to find a good home. That guy is a monster.
He's too good to be a backup in the NFL. He's got to make a starter somewhere. But I just think it's a good sign that we're finally seeing these moves from teams that are looking to get better. And realistically, I've been saying it for years, but Philadelphia has finally shown the NFL that you have to have not only a solid run game, but a great offensive line to be successful and make it to that level on a consistent basis. So this is just showing that other teams are getting that message.
Well, to wrap it up, I'm going to throw out a curveball to end the show.
Ooh.
So with the league officially beginning tomorrow, I've been reading some rumors and some, tweets, some hardcore fans that, there's always some crazy ass trades at this time of the year. One, I'm going to slap myself if I don't bring it up. Shauna will hate me. So before the trades, she's a big Buckeyes fan, and she was super happy about the Justin Fields to the Jets. I told her to slow her roll because it's still the Jets, Jets. But she wanted to remind me that he is a great quarterback, and she thinks it's a fresh start. And being with his college teammate at receiver, she thinks that they're going to be better than they probably will be. But I wanted to see, how do you feel about that? Because neither one of us brought up the Justin Fields pickup.
I almost did. I really did, because it is a pretty big move for the Jets. I think this is a solid pickup, although
they probably should have done 2 or 3 years ago, but yeah.
Yeah. And at this point right now, again, like I just got done saying about the teams with second-year quarterbacks, they have yet to figure that out. They have yet to figure out the offensive line issues and whatnot. So at this point right now, if you're Justin, sure, yeah, you get Garrett, fantastic. But can they protect me long enough to actually throw it to Garrett? So it's the Jets. We'll find out. We'll see how it goes. But at this point right now, as we saw, usually when offensive linemen leave the Jets, Mekhi Becton, they do a lot better than when they play with the Jets. And at this point, I'll just come out and say it. I think both New York teams, the Jets and the Giants, are probably two of the worst run football organizations in the NFL, along with the Cleveland Browns. And at this point, I have yet to see anything that has changed my opinion.
So I will throw out a couple trades, and they aren't made up trades. These are
some that you've heard
that people, in the sports industry have brought up.
Okay.
One, Christian McCaffrey. Is he on his way out of Frisco with this rebuild? All these moving parts. It seems to a lot of these, Ian Rappaport seems to think that, if they don't line up their guys, that they might be trading McCaffrey to get that bank rolling again and bring over some new blood. After losing Debo, they lost Greenlaw, they lost so many guys on top of, thinking they had Bosa. So they drop a player or two to cover that. And then he pulls out and goes to Buffalo, which we didn't talk about. But
let's
the other
go
one,
Buffalo. I don't know. They just dropped Von Miller too. So you have to replace Von Miller with somebody.
So one of those is, don't be surprised if McCaffrey somehow, some way gets out of Frisco. I don't see it happening, because that's what puts the seats filled in Frisco is McCaffrey.
I wouldn't go that far. I would say more, it's like we said with the Debo trade. I don't understand why you'd be trading away all of Brock Purdy's key targets if you're going to pay Brock Purdy big money.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that you want to pay all of these guys, but Brock needs to get paid first. Then we'll see how the team fares after that. You need to keep every bit of this team together that has been with Brock already to keep the production going. And it's like throwing away Kittle. That doesn't make sense. Like, it is way too pivotal of a piece of the San Francisco 49ers to really contemplate that. But then again, they just dropped Tyler Juszczyk too, which I absolutely was shocked by.
Yes.
And I that almost made my top 5 list as well, because if whomever gets Kyle Juszczyk, you are getting the best fullback in football. Only problem is not a lot of teams use fullbacks anymore.
Yeah,
so
I believe there's 4 or 5 of us. The other one is Tyreek. Tyreek has had his surgery on his wrist. He's not even supposed to be back until mid-camp. He has apologized after his outburst at the end of the season. And he's also tweeted out several times that Miami fans, hold on to me, that this is going to be the best season he's ever had this year.
Hold on to me, he says.
So, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, he hated us. He was on his way out. And now that his agent showed him the bank account and how much money he has left on this Miami deal, I am a diehard Dolphin fan. Tyreek is a big part of our team, but I understand both sides of the business. So if and when we get an opportunity or an option that makes sense, and whether that's shooting younger talent or reclaims what we got rid of to get him, I don't see it happening. But, especially with this free agency, how many veteran receivers that are out there, I don't know why somebody would want to trade, a couple high picks for Tyreek, but Tyreek is Tyreek. I don't see it happening, but what say you?
High picks is a stretch, but I do think we will see a Tyreek trade at least by mid to late season, like right before the trade deadline, maybe, because after that outburst last year, like I've said with Myles Garrett, when players reach that boiling point, they don't just turn around and decide, oh, wait, I want to play here. I'm just kidding. Haha. Like that's not how it works. The frustrations will mount again. It will boil over again, especially if the team doesn't have success as he wants it to have success and be a part of it at the biggest part of it. So I could see the trade being done, but high draft picks would be a stretch. I think that you get maybe a 3rd or 4th round for Tyreek Hill, especially with the way these trades are going. Not a lot of trades, especially for wide receivers, have gone for 1st, 2nd rounders. That's why I laughed when DK Metcalf was up for a 1st and a 3rd, because there was no way. I was like, no. Okay.
What did they end up getting out of that trade? Do you remember?
Honestly, I need to look that up. Hold
on. The other ones were Deshaun Watson, which I don't see any GM with a job trading for this guy, not only because his talent has gone downhill, but it's the drama that comes with him. I don't see Deshaun Watson getting traded. Obviously, if they could do it, I might give a little more respect to the Cleveland Browns. But I think they dug that hole, and I think they're kind of stuck in it. And the final thing I've got is going back to the Jets. Sauce Gardner has been rumored to the Vikings made an offer to the Jets to trade Addison, receiver Jordan Addison, to the Jets for Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner repeated and tweeted, I thought this was a joke. He said, I thought this was a fucking joke. And what the hell? This is a serious trade. So I don't know if this is something that the Jets are looking into. I know they need some more receivers now that Devontae's gone, but we've gone through several veteran receivers that are probably going to be way cheaper than trading your number 1 cornerback.
My phone took forever. Or I'm sorry, my computer took forever to load this, but apparently they gave up a 2nd round draft pick for DK Metcalf, which is still pretty high. I would be very surprised if the Jets took that trade. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sauce Gardner is Sauce Gardner. He's probably going to be the best corner in the league here in the next 2 years. That's why I don't necessarily see him leaving the Jets unless there's actual want from him to leave the Jets. Yeah. But at this point, I don't see that being the case. I think they want to hold on to him for as long as humanly possible.
Well, we got some big news coming up this weekend. We'll have another video this weekend. Hopefully, we get some headlines coming up. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, everything, TikTok. Burdick's been hard at it.
Doing what I can with the clips, man. Doing what I can.
But follow us, and like that sign says right behind beautiful Burdick, it says follow EBS. Big news coming.
It's absolutely coming this weekend, so look out for the video. It is going to, if you live in the Bakersfield area, we are very, very excited for what is to come. So thank you again, everybody, for supporting the show, as this would not happen if you guys were not a part of this. So we appreciate every bit of you guys listening and viewing and sharing these videos and helping us out. It helps support us, and it helps keep the show going. So obviously we appreciate every damn bit of it. But
and if you're a gamer and you're playing the wrestling game,
I'm going to be hopefully.
I forgot that it didn't come out until Friday.
Yeah, technically
we've had it.
The base, the people who bought the base form, we get it on Friday. That's why we wanted to jump on it a little bit early. But yes, we'll be streaming every Saturday, 6 p.m. I'll be going live this Saturday with more WWE 2K25. Probably get a little bit of college football in there a little bit. I want to try to throw in a little bit of different things, maybe some horror games as well, if me and Sparky can get on at the same time. I am a big fan of the Dark Pictures anthology games, and Sparky hasn't played them yet, so it'll be a lot of fun to play those online with Sparky and get his reactions. Because if you've played those, they are a lot of fun. Very, very much like horror movies. And there's actually a movie coming out based on one of them called Until Dawn here, coming out in April. So we'll have a movie review most likely coming out on that one as well. But that is all we got for you, I believe, this week, right? You got nothing else?
No, that's it. Let's go.
Fantastic, my friend. Well, thank you guys for listening. Like, share, subscribe, as Sparky said. And we are all over the place on social media. And check us out for this weekend's news. Peace out.